year is 2019, and our society is increasingly aware of the disturbing fact that harmful crimes are committed every day in the one place that everyone is entitled to feel safe: home. People who abuse their families often do so within the family home. And our community generally recognizes that family violence is a serious and pervasive crime, often committed against intimate partners and children and elders. But what if I told you that we were leaving someone out? Someone that abusers also target. Someone who definitely cannot speak for themselves. Someone shorter, probably furrier. Pets. This is my cat, Smudge. And where is she? Where are you, Smudge? There she is. This is my cat, Smudge. I actually met Smudge through my husband, and I can tell you with supreme confidence that she is the love of my husband's life. I met my husband in law school, and I distinctly recall on our first date that he was quick to bring up his beloved cat, Smudge. He actually described her to me as his life partner, which I thought that was a bold choice on a first date. He showed me photo after photo of Smudge the beautiful, Smudge the brilliant, and I remember thinking, uh-oh, because I was not a cat person. In fact, I have spent my entire life avoiding cats because I have a severe cat allergy. But I really liked this guy, this tall, dreamy, smart, sensitive guy who just happened to be in love with his snot-inducing cat. So, what's a girl with a severe cat allergy to do in those circumstances? Well, naturally, I concocted an elaborate web of deception to hide my cat allergy from him. And this worked for a while, until one night when he found me stuffing a box of allergy pills into my pocket. But by then it was too late. I was head over heels in love with him. So I pounded back the antihistamines, I started taking the nasal sprays, I started getting shots to the arm every week and then every month. And now, 114 shots and 5 years later, and we are happily married, and I love Smudge, and Smudge loves me. And in case you were wondering, yes, I am still wildly allergic to her. But I learned something very important over those 5 years. I learned firsthand that pets are part of families, and there isn't much we wouldn't do for them. Unfortunately, abusers know this too. People who target their own family members are well positioned to see the bond between human victims and their pets, and they may exploit that bond by threatening to harm or neglect or remove a pet, or worse, they may actually hurt a pet just to prove a point. In this way, abusers use pets to gain power and control, to manipulate human victims to keep quiet and stay put. And while my suffering over my cat allergy makes for a good story, it's nothing compared to the real pain suffered by victims who have their pets used against them as tools of cruelty and violence. So I did graduate from law school, and I sneezed my way through my article to become a lawyer, and now I am a Crown prosecutor, and I specialize in the prosecution of family violence, the abuse of intimate partners and children and other family members, which to me includes pets. It's through my work in this area that I learned, on a case-by-case basis, of the connection between harm to pets and harm to people. I didn't know that there was a formal term for this, but the social sciences field calls it the violence link. Research in this area goes back almost 20 years, and most of it is from the United States, but recently here, in this jurisdiction, Dr. Donna Crawford and the Alberta SPCA conducted a study. They interviewed women at women's shelters who had fled violence in their homes, and they asked them a series of questions. Of the women who were interviewed for that study who had pets, 59% of them said that they delayed fleeing abuse because of concern for their animals. 36% said that the abuser had actually threatened or even harmed their pet. And in 85% of those cases, children witnessed the abuse of animals. Now, statistics are one thing, but I think it's important to hear the words of someone who's actually experienced this abuse. And I warn you that this is not easy to hear, but I think that it's irresponsible to only speak in the abstract about abuse. So here are the words of one woman who was interviewed for the study, describing what was going on in her home. "He used my cat to make sure I knew he was capable of doing exactly what he said he would do. He took his collar and hung him from the closet door until his little feet couldn't touch the ground. And he said, 'If you touch him, I will kill him.' That is torture, both of the pet and of the person. Yet, the fact that pets are victims too, and the link between harm to pets and harm to people remain unacknowledged problems in our society. So what are we going to do about this problem? Well, the human services field has thought of some solutions. For example, women's shelters have recognized the role that pets play in decision-making for victims of domestic violence, and many of them have changed their rules to allow pets to come to the shelter too. Or they've partnered with their local humane societies to create pet safekeeping programs, a safe place where pets can go while victims figure out their next steps. In Tennessee, at the university there, they are offering a special certificate program in the novel field of veterinary social work, which is exactly what it sounds like it is. A social worker stationed at a vet clinic or a humane society who is trained to take accounts of abuse from victims and to connect them with appropriate supports and resources. In my private life, I've been working on a good old-fashioned button campaign to try to raise awareness about this. Professionals working with animals would wear this button, which reads, "It's okay to talk to me about family violence." And professionals working with families in crisis would wear the other button, which reads, "It's okay to talk to me about animal abuse." In this way, we can honor what we know about the link between harm to pets and harm to people by applying it across fields. And a button is a non-invasive way of signaling to a victim that service providers understand the link and they're ready to help. But being a lawyer, I really want there to be a legal solution to this problem. Unfortunately, while both victims and abusers understand and appreciate that pets are part of families, the law really doesn't. Let's talk first about law enforcement. Did you know that our model for the investigation of animal abuse is 198 years old? SPCAs, Societies for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, were founded in the 1800s in Victorian England by wealthy philanthropists. And yet, they are still largely responsible for the investigation of animal abuse in this country. And many of them still survive on private donations. Now, animal protection officers are trained to detect distress in pets, but not in people. And the police, on the other hand, are trained and authorized to investigate crimes against intimate partners and children, but they rarely receive training in the investigation of animal cruelty. Neither of these forces typically has any information about the link between harm to pets and harm to people. Now, I think these two teams should work together to respond to calls of family violence to protect both pets and people. And I think that the investigation of animal abuse and neglect should be 100% publicly funded. Law enforcement should all have training on the link between harm to pets and harm to people. And there is hope in this area. The Canadian Violence Link Coalition, founded by Humane Canada, has recently conducted what appears to be the first training for law enforcement on the violence link. Emergency protection laws should also protect pets. Now, in this jurisdiction, we have a law that allows a victim of family violence to go to a judge to seek an emergency order of protection for themselves and for their family members. Unfortunately, this law doesn't treat pets as part of families. It only protects against property damage, and it's not clear what that would mean in the context of a pet. Laws like this fail to recognize the human-animal bond, the love that we have for our pets, and the need to unequivocally protect them for what they are, part of a family. The criminal law should also recognize that pets are vulnerable. Now, our criminal law says that when an offender takes advantage of a vulnerable victim, like a child, in committing a crime, that makes their crime even more serious. Pets are vulnerable too. They depend on their families for everything, for food, for water, for shelter, for love. And when an abuser harms not just any animal, but their own family pet, that should make their crime more serious. And right now, it doesn't. But let me tell you the thing that bothers me the most about our criminal law. Right now, animal cruelty is regarded as a victimless crime. The crime itself recognizes that animals are sentient beings, that they feel pain, that they can suffer psychologically, and yet they are not allowed to be victims. And that's because our law defines a victim as the person against whom an offense is committed. And animals are not legal persons. What's more, in every other crime, you can have what's called a secondary victim, someone who's hurt by a crime against someone else, but not in the context of animal cruelty. And that's because animals can't be victims, and therefore no one else can be a victim of a crime against them. So for example, in the quote that you heard earlier, the woman who was forced to watch her cat be tortured, she can't formally be considered a victim of that offense. Without changes to our law to fix these problems, prosecutors like me are left to overcome them on a case-by-case basis, trying to persuade one judge at a time in courtrooms all across our country. Now, don't get me wrong, I am happy to do that. I have done it, and I will continue to do it. Not just because I love my pet, but because I know you love yours too. But don't you think it's time for our law to change, to reflect the reality that pets are part of families, that we love them, and that they deserve to be protected because they are victims too? If our community is serious about protecting families from harm, then we have to protect all members of a family, even the furry ones. Thanks for your time.